What if I told you there's a force more dangerous than evil itself? Something that makes crime possible on a massive scale, yet operates in plain sight every day. When Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a brilliant theologian who resisted the Nazis, was locked in a prison cell awaiting execution, he made a shocking discovery. After years of trying to fight against one of history's most brutal regimes, he realized that evil wasn't the greatest threat to humanity. The real danger was something far more common. Something that might be sitting next to you at work. Something that might be in your family. Something that might even be looking back at you in the mirror. This hidden force is all around us today, and you might be part of the problem without realizing it. We've all encountered it. That person who refuses to acknowledge facts despite overwhelming evidence. The colleague who follows dangerous trends without questioning them. The relative who shares harmful misinformation but can't be reasoned with. You present them with clear proof, irrefutable logic, mountains of evidence, and they just smile, shake their head, and say, "Whatever. That's what you think." It's maddening. But it's not just annoying. It's actually dangerous. This force that Bonhoeffer identified has toppled nations, enabled genocides, and continues to threaten our society more than any criminal ever could. Today, we're going to explore why Bonhoeffer believed stupidity, not evil, is humanity's greatest threat, and how to make sure you're not part of the problem. Because unlike evil, which can be recognized and fought, stupidity wears a mask of righteousness that makes it nearly impossible to defeat. To understand why stupidity is more dangerous than malice, we need to first understand Bonhoeffer himself. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was born in 1906 in what he described as a land of poets and thinkers. Germany had produced brilliant minds like Kant, Goethe, and Beethoven. It was a nation that prided itself on intellectual achievement and cultural refinement. Yet Bonhoeffer watched in horror as this same society descended into barbarism. His country, filled with ordinary, educated people, embraced hatred, violence, and eventually genocide. And the most terrifying part? Most Germans didn't see themselves as evil. They believed they were doing the right thing. As a Lutheran pastor and theologian, Bonhoeffer spoke out against the Nazi regime from the beginning. He helped Jews escape, joined the resistance, and eventually became part of a plot to assassinate Hitler, actions that would lead to his arrest in 1943. It was during his imprisonment, as he reflected on how his nation had fallen so far, that he developed his theory of stupidity. In his famous Theory of Stupidity letter, he wrote something profound. Evil can be exposed and even prevented by protest. But against stupidity, we are defenseless. But Bonhoeffer wasn't talking about low intelligence or lack of education. He was describing something far more dangerous. Let's be crystal clear. The stupidity Bonhoeffer described isn't about IQ or education level. It's not about being uninformed. That's just ignorance, which can be fixed with information. The stupidity Bonhoeffer identified is a moral surrender, a willful abandonment of independent thought. It's giving up your ability to think critically because it's easier to follow along with the crowd or authority. Here's what makes this form of stupidity so much worse than evil. Evil knows it's evil. A thief knows they're stealing. A liar knows they're lying. Even the worst criminals typically understand that what they're doing is wrong. They just don't care, or they justify it somehow. Because evil recognizes itself, it carries what Bonhoeffer called the seed of its own destruction. Evil people feel guilt, unease, or at least a need to hide their actions. Evil can be exposed and fought directly. But stupidity? Stupidity is immune to facts. It's blind to reason. It's deaf to evidence. The stupid person, in Bonhoeffer's sense, doesn't think they're doing anything wrong. They're utterly convinced of their own righteousness. They're not just defending their views. They're defending their very identity. You can argue with a malicious person, but you cannot argue with a stupid one. They don't engage with facts. They dismiss them. They don't debate. They mock. And most dangerously, they are utterly convinced they're right. Martin Luther King Jr. recognized this same threat decades later when he said, "Nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." This pattern isn't unique to Nazi Germany. Throughout history, we see the same mechanism at work in every case of mass atrocity. The Rwandan genocide, the Cambodian killing fields, the Cultural Revolution, Jim Crow America. In each case, ordinary people, neighbors, friends, even family members, participated in horrible acts, not because they were all inherently evil, but because they had surrendered their moral responsibility to think for themselves. And before you comfort yourself by thinking, "That's all in the past," look around. We see this same pattern playing out today, from deadly health misinformation spreading online, to climate science denial despite clear evidence, to political extremism that dehumanizes opponents. The pattern continues. The most terrifying aspect of stupidity is that it operates unconsciously. People don't even realize they're doing it. They believe they're right. They cling to their views with absolute certainty that no argument, no evidence, no rational explanation can shake. And this dance between authority and stupidity, between those who exploit stupidity and those who surrender to it, is what makes stupidity more dangerous than any individual criminal could ever be. Now, here's the most counterintuitive truth Bonhoeffer discovered. Stupidity is not an intellectual defect, but a moral one. You can be brilliant, yet deeply stupid. You can have multiple degrees, score high on IQ tests, and still exhibit this dangerous form of stupidity that Bonhoeffer warned about. Consider Martin Heidegger, one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. His work on existentialism and phenomenology revolutionized Western philosophy. He was undeniably brilliant, a towering intellectual figure. Yet despite his extraordinary intelligence, Heidegger joined the Nazi Party in 1933 and remained unrepentant about it until his death in 1976. He used his considerable intellectual talents to justify and support a regime that committed unspeakable atrocities. By contrast, many intellectually simple people throughout history have shown profound moral wisdom and courage. Think of the farmers who hid Jewish families during the Holocaust, the uneducated civil rights activists who faced fire hoses and attacked dogs, or the ordinary people who risked everything to help others escape tyranny. Intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing. One can be brilliant, yet morally bankrupt. When we encounter new information that contradicts our existing beliefs, our brains actually experience something similar to physical pain. Our neural pathways are set up to protect our existing worldview. Contradictory information creates cognitive dissonance, a state of mental discomfort that we instinctively try to avoid. The easy way out is to reject the new information. The harder path is to question our beliefs. This is why intelligent people can be so resistant to facts that challenge their worldview. Their intelligence just makes them better at creating elaborate justifications. What's most important to understand is that no one is born stupid in Bonhoeffer's sense. People become stupid. This transformation is what we need to understand. The process often begins with social pressure. Humans are tribal creatures. We want to belong. When our group adopts certain beliefs or behaviors, we feel an intense pressure to conform. Standing apart from the group, questioning the prevailing narrative, can be isolating and even dangerous. Fear plays a crucial role too. In uncertain times, independent thinking feels risky. It's comforting to surrender our judgment to authority figures who promise simple solutions to complex problems. They tell us who to blame, what to believe, how to act. All we have to do is stop questioning. Over time, this surrender of independent thought becomes habitual. The capacity for critical thinking atrophies like an unused muscle. What begins as a conscious choice to go along with the group eventually becomes an unconscious inability to think for yourself. And here's the truly frightening part. This transformation is happening right now, all around us. The technology and media environment we live in today is actually accelerating this process. Our social media feeds create echo chambers where our existing beliefs are constantly reinforced. News algorithms serve us content designed to confirm our biases and trigger our emotions. Online communities reward conformity and punish dissent. We're living in perfect conditions for the spread of Bonhoeffer's stupidity. The question is, how exactly does this transformation happen in modern society? Bonhoeffer described the spread of stupidity as almost a sociological law. When power rises, stupidity spreads. Under the influence of power, whether political, religious, or cultural, many people willingly relinquish their independence. They accept slogans, propaganda, and oversimplified explanations. They no longer see the world for what it is, but for what they've been told it is. This isn't just an individual problem, it's a collective one. Stupidity thrives in groups where independent thought is discouraged. It spreads from person to person like a contagion. Each person who surrenders their thinking makes it easier for others to do the same. George Orwell depicted this phenomenon brilliantly in his novel 1984. Concepts like doublethink, holding two contradictory beliefs simultaneously, and newspeak, limiting language to limit thought, show how authoritarian systems deliberately cultivate stupidity. The aim isn't just to control what people do, but to control what they're capable of thinking. When you can't even conceive of alternatives, you become the perfect subject. But why are stupid people so resistant to facts and reasoning? Why can't they simply be informed or argued out of their stupidity? First, there's identity protection. When beliefs become part of your identity, challenging those beliefs feels like an attack on who you are. Facts aren't just information. They're existential threats. Second, there's the comfort of belonging. Admitting you've been wrong means risking rejection from your group. The social cost of changing your mind can be enormous. Third, there's cognitive ease versus cognitive strain. Thinking critically requires effort. It's mentally taxing. Going along with what you've been told is easier, more comfortable. Finally, there's what psychologists call the backfire effect. When deeply held beliefs are challenged with facts, people often double down on those beliefs. The very facts meant to change their minds end up strengthening their resolve. We see this mechanism at work throughout history. From the witch trials of Salem to the McCarthy hearings, from the Cultural Revolution to modern conspiracy movements, the pattern is remarkably consistent. But perhaps most disturbing is how social media and modern communication technologies have supercharged this process. The algorithms that drive our online experience are designed to maximize engagement, not truth. They feed us content that confirms our existing beliefs and triggers strong emotions. Filter bubbles separate us into different information realities. We no longer share a common understanding of basic facts. What's obviously true to one person is fake news to another. The result is a fragmented society where mutual understanding becomes impossible. We're not just disagreeing, we're living in different worlds. This technological acceleration of stupidity may be the greatest threat we face as a society. Because when we can no longer agree on basic reality, democracy itself becomes impossible. So how do you know if you're falling into this trap? Here are 7 warning signs of Bonhoeffer's stupidity that you should watch for in yourself and others. First, You surrender your ability to question and think independently. When you find yourself accepting ideas without examining them simply because they come from your side or an authority figure you trust, you're displaying the first sign of stupidity. Second, you conform to group thinking without examination. When you believe something primarily because the people around you believe it, you're prioritizing belonging over truth. Third, you respond more to emotional appeals than logical arguments. When you find yourself moved to strong opinions by fear, anger, or outrage, rather than by facts and reasoning, you're being manipulated. Fourth, you embrace simplistic explanations for complex problems. When you find comfort in reducing nuanced issues to simple narratives with clear villains and heroes, you're avoiding the cognitive strain of genuine understanding. Fifth, you refuse to consider evidence that contradicts your beliefs. When you immediately dismiss information that challenges your worldview without genuinely engaging with it, you're protecting your beliefs at the expense of truth. Sixth, you feel absolute certainty about complex issues. When you have no doubts about your position on complicated matters where reasonable people disagree, you've likely stopped thinking critically. Seventh, you dehumanize those who disagree with you. When you find it easy to dismiss entire groups of people as evil, stupid, or insane rather than trying to understand their perspective, you've surrendered your moral responsibility. Have you caught yourself doing any of these recently? I know I have. We're all vulnerable to these tendencies. The question isn't whether we sometimes fall into stupidity, but whether we have the courage to pull ourselves out. So how can we protect ourselves and our society? Here are 7 strategies that can help. First, commit to intellectual independence and critical thinking. Make a conscious decision to form your own judgments based on evidence rather than authority or group consensus. Remember that thinking for yourself isn't selfish. It's a moral responsibility. Second, question authority and popular narratives, especially ones you agree with. It's easy to be skeptical of ideas that challenge your beliefs. The real test is whether you can apply that same skepticism to ideas that confirm them. Third, embrace complexity and nuance in a world that favors simplicity. Be suspicious of explanations that are too clean, too convenient, or that place all blame on a single cause or group. Reality is usually messy and multifaceted. Fourth, learn to recognize manipulation tactics used by the media and leaders. Understand how emotional appeals, deceptive framing, and information overload can be used to short-circuit your critical thinking. Fifth, practice intellectual humility. Be willing to change your mind. The ability to admit when you're wrong isn't weakness, it's strength. It shows that you value truth more than your ego. Sixth, seek out diverse perspectives intentionally. Make a habit of exposing yourself to thoughtful people who see the world differently than you do. Not to convert them or be converted, but to understand. Seventh, create space for reflection rather than immediate reaction. The pace of modern life and social media pushes us toward instant responses. Resist that pressure. Take time to think deeply before forming opinions. Now let me share some practical exercises you can do to strengthen your thinking. Try steel-manning opposing arguments. Instead of attacking the weakest version of an idea you disagree with, try to construct the strongest possible version of it. Only when you can articulate an opposing view in a way that its proponents would recognize and respect are you truly engaging with it. Conduct an information diet audit. Take stock of where your information comes from. Are you hearing diverse perspectives or just variations of the same worldview? Are you consuming content that challenges you to think or just confirms what you already believe? Question your foundational assumptions. We all have basic assumptions about the world that we rarely examine. Take time to identify these assumptions and ask yourself, how do I know this is true? What if it isn't? What would follow from that? These practices won't make you immune to stupidity, but they will make you more resistant. And in a world where stupidity spreads like a contagion, resistance is crucial not just for yourself, but for society. Let's return to Dietrich Bonhoeffer's story. After years in prison, he was executed by hanging on April 9, 1945, just 2 weeks before Allied forces liberated the camp where he was held. He died for his refusal to surrender his moral and intellectual independence. His final words before being led to the gallows were, "This is the end. For me, the beginning of life." Even facing death, he maintained his commitment to truth over comfort. The greatest danger to society isn't the criminal who knows they're doing wrong. It's the person who does wrong believing they're right. The thief knows they're stealing. The murderer knows they're killing. But the person who has surrendered their thinking can commit atrocities while believing they're serving a greater good. This is why unchecked stupidity inevitably leads to authoritarianism. When people stop thinking for themselves, they become tools for those in power. They can be directed to hate, to harm, to destroy, all while believing they're justified. The relationship between stupidity and violence is direct. Almost every case of mass violence in human history was preceded by a campaign to dehumanize the victims, to make them seem less than human, less deserving of empathy or consideration. This dehumanization is only possible when people stop thinking critically and start accepting what they're told. This means that addressing stupidity may be more important than fighting crime directly. Crime is a symptom. Stupidity is a cause. When we surrender our thinking, we create the conditions for greater suffering. Bonhoeffer's ultimate warning remains as relevant today as it was in his time. If we don't actively fight for independent thinking, we will not just be battling stupidity, we will be ruled by it. So, I ask you, where might you be surrendering your thinking? What beliefs do you hold that you've never truly examined? What authorities do you trust without questioning? What groups do you belong to that shape your thinking in ways you haven't considered? These aren't comfortable questions. They shouldn't be. Growth rarely happens in comfort zones. In the comments below, I'd like you to share a time when you caught yourself falling into this kind of stupidity, and how you broke free. What made you realize you had stopped thinking for yourself? What did it feel like to reclaim your intellectual independence? If this video made you think differently about thinking itself, consider subscribing for more perspectives that challenge conventional wisdom. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. But be prepared for resistance. Remember, you can't argue with someone out of stupidity. You can only plant seeds that might one day grow. Next time, we'll explore the surprising connection between comfort and corruption. Why easy lives create weak minds. Until then, stay curious, stay independent, and above all, never surrender your responsibility to think for yourself.